Okay, did the pilot of Lanterns just kill Hal Jordan in episode 1? We all knew this show was supposed to be a murder mystery, but I didn't think Hal was going to be the murder. Now, after watching this premiere episode a few times now, I actually think there's a much bigger question here than who killed Hal Jordan. Because Lanterns episode 1 basically sets up a mystery that appears to have been unfolding for at least 30 years. From questions like, why did Abin Sur really come to Earth? Why is Rushville, Nebraska so important? Who are these aliens that claim they're on Earth for vengeance? Who the hell does Will Macon actually work for? Why has Jon Stewart's father been preparing his son to become fearless since he was a child? And more importantly, where is Hal Jordan's ring? Because that question might be the key to whether Hal Jordan is actually dead or alive. Now, I got my notes here. I've got some pretty cool connections that we'll make to the DC Comics, and I've already got some theories that might be brilliant about 6 weeks from now or absolutely ridiculous. But hey, that's part of the fun, so we're going to go through it all. We're breaking down the story, Jon and Hal's relationship, the themes, the Easter eggs, things you all might have missed, and towards the end, we'll be officially opening up the Lantern's case files and try to figure out what the show is actually setting up. So, with all that being said, let's get into it. The episode opens in 1996. I really like this opening scene because before we even see Aaron Pierre as the adult version of Jon Stewart, the show tells us something important about him, and that being that he grew up idolizing Hal Jordan. We meet this young Jon with his two brothers watching a 60-minute special about the man the world knows as its protector as the Green Lantern. As Hal Jordan is finally revealing his identity to the world, but there's something really interesting buried within this interview. Right away, the reporter tells us it's been approximately 10 years since the Green Lantern stopped the meteor from destroying Victoria Falls. So around 1986, Green Lantern publicly appeared and saved countless lives, but Hal didn't reveal who he actually was. And now, 10 years later, he's finally sitting down and saying that he's Hal Jordan to the world. So immediately, I had questions. First off, why now? Why spend a decade protecting Earth while concealing your identity and suddenly deciding to show who you are in 1996? Maybe it's nothing more than Hal becoming comfortable with his role. Hell, maybe the world has changed at this point. But in my mind, this being a mystery series, I'm going to keep that written down for later. Because the episode doesn't explain why it took him 10 years to identify himself. Now, for my comic fans out there, we got to talk about Victoria Falls and Green Lantern's connections because they have a very strange one when it comes to the comics. Going all the way back to Justice League of America issue 9 from 1962, which tells an early version of the Justice League origins, which was a strange meteorites arriving on Earth carrying alien threats. And the Green Lantern's portion of that adventure takes him to, drumroll please, you guessed it, Victoria Falls. Now, am I saying Lanterns just secretly confirmed it's adapting Justice League of America issue 9? Absolutely not. We're only one episode into this thing, but Green Lantern, Meteor, Victoria Falls, to me that seems very specific, so for now, I'm putting that on the board. This could be a fun Easter egg, could be foreshadowing, or it could mean absolutely nothing, so we'll just have to wait and find out. Now, there's also another interesting piece of the DC history in this interview as Hal is described as Earth's first Green Lantern. And technically, there's an asterisk there. I say that because the first Green Lantern published by DC was Alan Scott, who debuted all the way back in 1940 in the comics. But Alan is very different from the Green Lantern mythology most people know today. His powers traditionally come from the mythical Starheart, and he wasn't originally a part of the intergalactic Green Lantern Corps. Now, Hal Jordan arrived later in the comics and became Earth's first human member of the Corps. Then you've got Guy Gardner, who became Hal's backup, and then eventually Jon Stewart entered the picture. So when it comes to the DCU, as they call Hal Earth's first Green Lantern, I think there's two possibilities. Either they're talking about the Green Lantern Corps, or they're establishing that as far as the public knows, Alan Scott doesn't exist in this history. But the most important part of this interview isn't a history lesson, it's what Hal says about fear. We learn Hal's father was also a test pilot and died in a crash when Hal was only 8. Now, Hal talks about that after losing his father, he stopped being afraid, and you'll notice the look on young John's face when he's saying this. He's completely locked in as Hal tells the world that he's not some god, he isn't inherently special, he's just a normal guy who was given the opportunity as John sits there and smiles. To me, I think little John heard that maybe someone like him could do this as well. But then his father comes home and suddenly the entire atmosphere completely changes. And the moment their father eventually walked through the door, all 3 of the boys stood up. To me, this wasn't just a sign of respect towards their father, but mostly a sign of them being afraid of him and fearful of him. And the word fear being the key word.
So you gonna tell me his real name?
Hal something.
How?
Yes, sir.
He has John go outside and he grabs an apple. Now this is where the scene gets really uncomfortable because we see little John puts the apple on his head and you'll notice what's behind him. There are already bullet holes showing that this isn't new. They've done this several times before. As his father aims and asks John if he's afraid, as he shoots and hits the apple, and his dad is proud that his son isn't afraid as they go to get some burgers together. Man, talk about one hell of a father-son bonding activity, but pay attention to what the show just did here. Minutes earlier, Hal was asked if he was afraid. Obviously, he said no. Then we have John being asked the same question, and I don't think that's accidental. To me, this became one of the biggest questions after watching this episode a few times, that being, why John? There are obviously 2 other boys in the room. Why does their dad take John outside? Is it punishment because John turned the TV on? Is John his favorite son? Does their father recognize something in him? And speaking of John's other brothers, as we flash forward, where are his brothers in 2016, but also later in 2026? What's their relationship with John now? Because the more we learn later, the more this apple scene starts feeling less like some bizarre parenting technique and more like training. To me, John's father appears to be conditioning his son to control his fear. And controlling fear happens to be the single most important requirement for being a Green Lantern. Hold on to that because John's dad says something later in this episode that supports this training idea. Now, I do want to point out that there is a person that was noticeably absent in that opening scene, and that being John's mother. You can see some of the family photos, and it appears that their mom is included, but we don't know where she is and what happened to her during this scene. I mean, she might be at work, maybe the parents are divorced, or maybe she's dead. Now, I want to share a quick theory with you all, and warning, you're going to have to put on your tinfoil hats for this one, but I want to go back to the footage that was shown in one of the trailers where we see a woman is holding the baby while it appears to be some type of Martian or an extraterrestrial figure that is approaching her. Now, could that be John's mother? Could John's family have experienced extraterrestrial contact when John was a baby? And could something have happened to his mom? Think about it like this. If John's father lost his wife because of an extraterrestrial incident, suddenly his obsession with making John fearless might have an entirely different meaning. Maybe he's not just raising a tough kid, but maybe he's preparing someone to protect Earth. From here, we jump forward 20 years as we get to meet John Stewart as an adult. We find him training, working on the punching bag, and you immediately get the impression that he's disciplined, he's structured, it's everything you expect from John Stewart. As he checks his watch, he sees his trainer pulls up late, hungover, and blasting music, and is no other than Hal Jordan. Now, I really love the reintroduction of these 2 characters at this point in their lives because look at the difference between Hal Jordan that watched television and Hal that he knows now. 1996 Hal was confident. He was a hero. He was a man who didn't get nervous. Whereas 2016 Hal, this guy just disappeared for 2 weeks and he shows up hungover for training. And I'm not going to lie, I did get a kick out of the banter between the 2 for the fact that Hal knows that John should be pissed, but John keeps his cool. A character trait that I've always loved about the character since I was first introduced to him in watching Justice League when I was a kid. Now, John has always been known to keep his emotions completely under control, and going back to that opening, we can contribute that to his Apple training. Now, Hal explains that he wasn't out partying for 2 weeks, but he was on Pharon IV trying to prevent a civil war. Now, I want to go back and speak on that name drop of Pharon IV because for those who don't know, this isn't just some random planet invented for the show. Now, this actually exists in the Green Lantern comics. The planet appears in Green Lanterns issue 156 in a story called Judas World. There's a much larger conflict going on that planet where Hal ultimately becomes involved. Now, like earlier with Victoria Falls, I don't think the show is saying everything from the comic happened exactly the same way, but I just love these little organic references. Yes, for comic book fans and Easter egg hunters is cool, but to me, there's actually something bigger going on here. This Hal Jordan has already lived a very active Green Lantern life. Now, I know the creative decision to have an older Hal isn't for everyone, but I do like the fact that our entry point into this world and into the Green Lantern's world comes through John Stewart's eyes, and that there are years of cosmic adventures behind Hal that we haven't seen, but we'll get to see them through John Stewart. Now, during the car ride, we learned that John has been training for 2 months, and Hal has yet to let him wear the ring. Now, John brings up how the Guardians picked him and how that should be a sign that he's ready.
The big blue bosses may think that you're hot shit, but you're just a fucking substitute teacher, Junior.
But Hal tells him the ring hasn't chosen him yet, but then Hal sees this as a training opportunity. He takes off the ring, offers it to John, who thinks this is a part of a test, as Hal puts it on the dashboard and tells him where to meet him as he jumps out of the moving car. It's little moments like Hal jumping out of a moving car that I actually really enjoy because it shows that a show like this with, the serious and mature grounded tone, it still has a personality. It lets us know that there is a sense of humor that the show's going to offer, even when they're still showcasing the characters and developing the characters as well as the story. Now, this stunt by Hal leaves John with 2 options. He can either panic or think quick on his feet like a lantern would as he uses the ring. Now, was it me or did you all connect all the dots because it feels very familiar? What Hal did was basically recreate John's childhood with the apple scene. Obviously not literally, but theoretically. John's father put him in danger and asks if he was afraid. Now Hal puts him in danger and asks the exact same question without actually saying it. John has spent his entire life being taught fearlessness through danger. And I think that's going to become very important as we watch this season unfold. Now, of course, John survives this car stunt put on by Hal, but the first person he calls to complain about what he just experienced is his dad. We see John is pissed, and rightfully so, as we see him for the first time lose his cool. His dad reminds him that this is all a part of the training. Now, when his dad said that, I immediately said to myself, how does he know that? He goes on to tell John that Hal can't kill him and that he's testing him and he should remain calm and stay the course and eventually he'll get the job. So again, how does John's dad know this and talks about this like he understands the Green Lantern playbook? Maybe he spent decades studying Hal? Maybe he's obsessed with Green Lanterns because John wants to become one? But combine this with the Apple training, I think his dad knows more than we're being told. Now, John's relationship with his father has varied across various different comic stories, but it hasn't traditionally been where his dad has spent his entire childhood preparing him to become a Green Lantern. So I think this may be new mythology for this version of John, and I'm very curious to see where it goes. Now, here's where we get what might quietly be the most important scene in this entire episode. Now, John still has Hal's ring, and it activates itself. And out comes a younger Hal Jordan in a hologram, or as John eventually calls it later, a halogram. This is a younger Hal who has essentially backed up his consciousness and combines the sentient of the ring. It's clear that this halogram can interact, it can think, and it also can recognize that something's going on. Young Hal can tell that present-day Hal hasn't been training John properly and learns that it's actually 2016. Now, Hal was supposed to update this consciousness back up regularly, but hasn't done so in over 10 years. Again, the question being, why? What happened to Hal during those 10 years? Why did he stop? Did he get lazy, or is there a reason for the version of Hal preserved inside the ring from an earlier period of his life? Remember this for later because we'll be coming back to this. Now, before moving on, let's hear from the sponsor of today's video, and that is Factor. You guys know my schedule is all over the place. Between screenings, filming reactions, editing videos, and trying to keep up with all the multiple platforms, it's really easy to fall into a habit of grabbing fast food or skipping meals altogether. That's honestly one of the reasons I've been enjoying Factor lately. They make eating real food incredibly easy, even on my busiest days. Factor makes chef-crafted, dietitian designed, ready-to-eat meals so you don't have to choose between real food and convenience. With over 175 banned ingredients, every Factor meal is designed around what supports a healthier lifestyle and nothing that doesn't. Factor meals are ready in 2 minutes and require no prep and no cleanup. So even on the days your schedule is completely out of control, eating well is still achievable. Every week, you'll find over 100 nutrient-dense menu items to choose from and new options like salmon burgers, shredded pork, collard greens, and much more. Plus, add-ons you'll crave like pumpkin-flavored cheesecakes and protein shakes. 97% of users agree that Factor meals help them live a healthier life, so you can feel confident that you're doing something good for yourself with every meal. What I've loved most is that it takes one less decision off my plate personally. After spending hours editing or getting home late from a screening, I don't have to think about cooking or ordering takeout. I can have a real meal ready in just a few minutes, and that's made it much easier for me to stay consistent instead of just eating whatever is convenient. Now, I've always tell you guys, I only want to recommend things that actually fit my lifestyle, and Factor genuinely does that. It saves me time. It helps me eat better during busy weeks and lets me get back to doing what I love most, which is talking movies with you all. So I use Factor, and you should too. Let's eat real. Head to factormeals.com/moviefiles50 off and use my code MovieFiles50 off to get 50% off and one free breakfast item per box for 1 year while supplies last until October 31st of 2026. Again, the code is MovieFiles50 off at factormeals.com, MovieFiles50 off at factormeals.com. See website for more details. Now, the Halogram has a message for his future self, and that being that there's hell in Rushville, Nebraska. Now, once John delivers that message to Hal, his entire demeanor changes from drunk uncle about to eat some tacos to quickly getting serious as he takes flight to Nebraska, leaving John behind again. Look, Hal's reaction tells us everything. Rushville means something to Hal. It's something important, it's potentially dangerous, as we are now entering the actual case. Now, John eventually makes it to Nebraska to find Hal, and as he's driving, he notices a heavy police presence around the football field. It's here where the audience and John gets to meet Sheriff Kerry Kane as he finds Hal sitting in the bleachers. Now, this to me is where the episode shifts in its tone and shifts in its genre, because those true detective comparisons really start to make sense here. We've got small town America, a bizarre crime scene, local law enforcement, outside investigators, jurisdiction problems, unknown victims, and somewhere underneath all this is the presence of aliens. That's exactly the tonal mixture this show promised, and again, this is when I was really leaning into the mystery going on. Now, Kerry told Hal and tells John that despite their jobs to protect Earth, they don't have jurisdiction because, as it seems, this isn't extraterrestrial. But Hal disagrees because his instincts tell him otherwise.
These victims are going to end up being alien.
Based on what?
I have a feeling.
He has a feeling.
I have a very strong feeling.
Well, then by all means, the scene is yours.
Hal calls out the mellow vibes and notices how no one seems particularly disturbed by this mass shooting. No one knows the victims, so as Hal says, something feels off. But it's here we see John isn't convinced, as he recalls the events and believes it was simply violence between rival football fans, not aliens.
Here's all you need to know. This is my job. And as long as I'm alive, that ain't changing. And I don't plan on dying anytime soon, so why don't you do yourself a big favor and take a nice long deep breath, Junior?
It's in this moment here that we can see one of the major differences between these two men. John wants evidence, Hal trusts experience. John wants procedure, while Hal trusts his instincts. Now, neither one of these approaches are necessarily wrong, but John's still learning when the rules don't fit the situation. Now, it's here that John makes his first mistake as he spots someone suspicious. Now, John respects the chain of command, and against Kerry's instructions to stay off the football field, he goes to tell her anyway. Turns out Kerry already knew, and sure enough, the suspect realizes something is happening and he takes off. Now, on the bright side, at least John's instincts were good, but his execution wasn't, but that's okay. John isn't written as incompetent because he's this rookie, he's inexperienced, and there's a difference, and again, he's learning on the job. John sees things, he thinks analytically, but he hasn't developed Hal's instincts quite yet. Now, eventually they catch the suspect, but Kerry won't let Hal interrogate him. Now, Hal invites John to get some drinks with him at the bar, and this is where their conversation might contain the central mystery of the entire series. Now, John asks about Hal becoming Green Lantern, and we get a familiar story, but with an interesting twist. As we know, Hal was a test pilot, and one night he was suddenly enclosed in a bubble. Hal was asked if he was afraid, he responded by saying no, and he was immediately transported to Nebraska. It was here that Hal discovered a crashed alien spaceship and he met Abin Sur, the dying Green Lantern who passes the ring to Hal and tells him the terms of the responsibility of being a Lantern. Now, this is all a part of the classic Green Lantern Hal Jordan origin story, except this location in Nebraska, as Hal tells John that Earth was off of the Lantern's grid. Abin Sur shouldn't have been here, and Hal has never understood why he was. We are now cooking with some gas because suddenly Rushville isn't just where the crime happened, but now we know that Nebraska connects all the way back to the beginning of Hal Jordan's Green Lantern career, and Hal believes that the crash wasn't an accident, which he goes on to explain why he created his halogram warning in the first place. So one of the biggest questions I'm carrying forward is simple. Why Nebraska? What is here? Why did Abin Sur come? What did he know? And did whatever brought Abin Sur here ultimately lead the aliens we're seeing in 2016 to Nebraska? Meanwhile, he puts some money in the jukebox and plays this same song over and over and over again. He does this to piss everyone off, as John eventually realizes that Hal wants a fight. Because if Hal gets arrested, he gets inside the police station and closer to the suspect. Now, while Hal is intentionally getting arrested, John meets a woman at the bar. Now, this mysterious woman seems to know a lot of knowledge about the Green Lanterns. Now, they have a little bit of back and forth, as John explains that he's trained to replace Hal if anything ever happens to him. But then the conversation switches from the bar as she takes John to walk her to her truck. And yes, John has a very different training session, and we'll just leave it at that. Now, while John never got the name of this mysterious woman, we're going to find out her identity a little bit later. Now, the next morning, John tries to bail Hal out, as Hal's bail is set to $200,000, showing that being Earth's legendary intergalactic protector does not get you a discount in Nebraska. Now, it's here that we meet the attorney by the name of William Macon, who happens to be married to Carrie. His father sent him to help Hal and invite him over to the ranch for a barbecue, which brings us to Will Macon. Hal and John arrive at the ranch and they see these heavily guarded men training outside as it looked like they're actually preparing for war. Now, Carrie tries to warn Hal and John about not wanting to owe her father-in-law, but Hal wants to meet this person to get some answers. Now, Will has researched both Hal and John and is very aware of the potential aliens on the football field. Now, he clearly has money, connections, armed personnel, but he's only the caretaker of this ranch and he won't identify his employer. So immediately we're all thinking, who employed Will Macon, right? Another mystery to put in the case file, because I have a feeling that we are going to be asking this question for a while. Now, Will explains his philosophy, which dates back to when Hal revealed himself and showed humanity that they weren't alone. And Will has spent years thinking about what happens when extraterrestrials don't come peacefully. He's a student of history. His people are prepared if things go south, and ultimately he sees his job as protecting Earth from people who weren't born on it. Now, that phrasing is very important because this is the DC universe. Superman hasn't publicly introduced himself yet at this point in the timeline, but eventually Clark Kent is an alien. So what does someone like Will think about Superman? Or any extraterrestrial living peacefully on Earth for that matter. Meanwhile, John shares a moment with Carrie and William's son as John helps him with the football and mentions his father, Apple exercise. But then in comes Noah's grandmother. And his grandmother is a woman from the truck by the name of Zoe Macon, which makes her Will's wife. John slept with the host's wife the night before showing up to the barbecue, and to make it even more interesting, Will already knows, as he makes a joke about John eating from another man's grill.
Might have slept with his wife.
Might have.
Definitely slept with his wife.
And he knows?
Apparently.
Jesus Christ, we've only been here 24 hours. I'm impressed.
But he doesn't seem particularly bothered. Taking a look at the Macons, it's clear that they know exactly what they want, and they get it. Will wanted Hal at his ranch, and he got him. Zoe wanted John, and she got him. And neither seems particularly surprised by the other's behavior. Maybe they have an open marriage, that's entirely possible, but with how mysterious Will is already, I'm keeping an eye on both of these characters because it's clear that the Macons want something from both Hal and John. Now, Will convinced his daughter-in-law to let Hal do his interrogation. Now, the suspect in custody goes by the name of Waylon Sanders. He seems to be an ordinary truck driver. He's into football. And after he got his medical exam, it shows that he is a human. Giving more proof to Carrie that Hal was wrong, but Hal doesn't care. John explains that there are roughly 14 extraterrestrial species capable of passing as a human as Hal walks in. Hal starts with Nebraska football trivia and Waylon passes, but then Hal switches it up by asking him about Harry Potter and Waylon gets stumped. Hal realizes that his answers sound like somebody who has studied humanity rather than somebody who's actually grew up a human, as Waylon eventually shows who he really is. Now, hypothetically, if he were an alien, he would be on a mission, and that mission would be about war. And if captured, he would detonate a bomb inside of himself with a single thought. Now, Hal says that he would just contain him with the ring, but then Waylon reveals that he knows the ring is running low on energy, which makes me think, how does he even know this? What kind of species is this, and how do they know about the lanterns? Because Waylon knows about the ring, its limitations, and the battery. But then he goes on to recite the Green Lantern Oath, which goes to show us again, these aren't random aliens who accidentally landed in Nebraska. They know about the Green Lanterns, and this pisses off Hal. Now, Waylon says something even more important. He looks at Hal and essentially tells him that you seem to want to die. And that connects directly to a conversation happening outside. John tells Carrie why he admires Hal because he's fearless, but Carrie disagrees. Her read on Hal is that he's not fearless, he's just simply lonely. No one cares about him, he doesn't care about anybody, and to me, that's so fascinating. Because John still sees the guy from the television, the superhero who told him that I don't experience fear, but Carrie sees the man underneath. And then Waylon identifies the same thing. Maybe Hal Jordan isn't fearless, maybe he just simply doesn't care whether he lives, which are completely different things. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the central theme of episode 1, that being fear. Hal loses his father and says he stopped experiencing fear after that. John's father trains fear out of him. Hal puts John in moral danger to test his fear. John controls his anger, Carrie sees loneliness disguised as fearlessness, Waylon sees a death sentence. So maybe the show isn't asking who is fearless, maybe it's asking, is fearlessness even healthy? Hal's lack of fear makes him a great Green Lantern. But what if that thing that everyone admires about him is also destroying him? And John has spent his entire life trying to become exactly like this man. To me, that's a really interesting character journey because maybe John's path isn't learning how to become Hal Jordan. Maybe it's learning how not to become Hal Jordan. Now, Waylon finally breaks and the bomb activates, and before everything goes to hell, he tells them why he's here, and it has to do with vengeance. Now, is that vengeance against Hal? Is it against Abin Sur? Is it against the Green Lantern Corps? Is it Earth, something that happened decades earlier? Because remember, Abin Sur mysteriously came to Nebraska. Now, these aliens are obviously in Nebraska, and they know Green Lantern mythology. I don't think these things are disconnected. Now, Hal manages to contain the explosion, but the police station gets wrecked, but everyone survives, which is the most important thing. And after Carrie did not believe Hal, we see him emerging from the dust, and he tells her,
Told you he was an alien.
Now, as this pilot comes to an end, we jump to another 10 years. Now, John is older, even though he doesn't look it, because we know black don't crack, as he's back in Nebraska and he drives past the Macon ranch, but it is now destroyed. John looks surprised, so whatever happened there, apparently John didn't know about it. As John arrives to the football field, he's greeted more differently by Sheriff Carey compared to when they first met. We watch them embrace each other with a hug, and we can see their relationship has clearly developed over the years. We find out that Noah is now an all-state football player, as Carrie tells John that nobody knows what she's about to show him except for the groundskeeper. as she leads him towards the stands, the same ones where Hal sat when the investigation begun 10 years earlier, and there Hal Jordan is. Frozen, with a bullet hole in his head, no ring, Hal Jordan is dead. And that is the end of episode 1, the pilot of Lanterns. And listen, I can already hear the portions of the Green Lantern Twitter typing like crazy, but obviously I don't think his death, if you want to call it that, is that simple. The body could absolutely be Hal. I actually think it possibly is, but remember what this episode deliberately taught us earlier about Hal's consciousness and how it can be backed up inside of the ring. And what's missing from the body? The ring. That's why my theory isn't necessarily the corpse is fake. My theory is that Hal Jordan's body may be dead, but Hal Jordan might not be completely gone. What if the missing ring still contains his hologram and maybe a newer one? Maybe Hal uploaded a new version of himself in there, or it might be something else entirely. Now, if we do believe Hal is dead, who took his ring? Which makes the ring potentially more important than a murder weapon. Which leads us to officially opening up our case and opening up the Lantern's case files. So after episode 1, here's what we don't know so far, starting off with who killed Hal Jordan and who took his ring. Moving on to Abin Sur, why was he in Nebraska? Why was Earth originally off the Lantern's grid? Why did Hal initially create the Rushville warning? Who sent Waylon and why are they seeking vengeance? Who employs Will Macon? What happened in the future to Will Macon's ranch? Why did Hal stop updating his halogram? Why did Hal reveal his identity publicly in 1996? What happened to John Stewart's mother? And why does John's father seem to know so much about becoming a Green Lantern? Okay, case files closed for now, but let's talk about the episode itself. After multiple rewatches, I really enjoyed this premiere episode. I think it was a really solid pilot. And the biggest compliment I can give this is that it feels like the show that they promised us. When they first pitched the show, they said that this would be Green Lanterns meet True Detective, and that's basically what we got in this first episode. It's grounded, it has its funny moments, it has a murder mystery in the center of it, and underneath everything, you got this enormous cosmic mythology slowly bleeding into this small town of America. That combination to me really works. And speaking of works, let's talk about the performances briefly. I'm a big fan of Aaron Pierre, and I thought that he was excellent in this first episode. But more importantly, he's not playing the fully formed John Stewart yet. He's still learning, but he's still disciplined. He's confident, and he still knows how to make mistakes. I think Aaron Pierre does such a good job of communicating John's restraint in this episode. This guy has spent his entire life being told, stay calm, control yourself, don't show any fear. So even when he's irritated with Hal, he keeps everything contained. And I'm just so interested to see what happens when something finally makes John lose control. Again, I thought Aaron Pierre was so good. But speaking of good, Kyle Chandler, another big fan of his, been watching him for a while. I thought that he was excellent. I love the humor, the swagger, the confidence. But he also plays the character with this weariness underneath everything, right? I think that's so important because this isn't young Hal Jordan. We're meeting someone who's been doing this for decades. He's saved worlds. He's stopped wars. He's seen things that John couldn't even imagine. And somewhere along the way, something changed. The hologram makes that very clear, and I think figuring out what happened to Hal Jordan might just be as important as figuring out who killed him. But the biggest thing that worked for me was the chemistry between Aaron Pierre and Kyle Chandler. I really enjoyed their back and forth. Again, John is control while Hal is chaotic. John follows procedure while Hal starts bar fights to get arrested. John wants the ring, Hal wants him to slow down, and between all the jokes, there's just something that's just really electric between the two, but also something really emotional. John is finally meeting the man he spent his entire life wanting to become, and he's discovering that hero is much more complicated than the guy he saw on television when he was a little boy. So if you all like these type of breakdowns, I would love to come back every single week to talk about this show with you all. I want to talk about the why things happen, right? What the characters are telling us, what they're not telling us, the DC connections to the comics, the clues, the themes, the suspects, and obviously my crazy theories. Every week, we can reopen these case files. We'll be adding evidence, removing suspects, updating theories, having some predictions, obviously, some that will probably age horribly bad, and some that might be true, right? So if you guys enjoy this first Lanterns breakdown, support the video by hyping this video if you're watching this on YouTube, hitting the like button, sharing this, and more importantly, subscribing if you all are new. If you're listening to this via podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you all get your podcasts from, hit the like. Let me know your thoughts about this episode in the comments below, as well as consider subscribing and following the podcast. Thank you all once again for listening or watching. I want this to be the place where after Lanterns ends, we all come together to try to figure it out. With all that being said, hope you all are staying safe. Don't forget you all are awesome. I will see you all soon.